Only once we unmask are we fit to stand behind the king. You should unmask. Like, no, really, that's really creepy, guys.
Okay, fine.
Hello, Red Stringers, and welcome to the Unredacted Reports, a post-season glance behind the curtain at what goes into the podcast you know and love. My name is Alondra Heilman, aka Lady Bedivere, or sometimes Agent Harker. And either because of or in spite of my 20-plus year career in theater, I have once again been asked to moderate this cacophony of absurdity. Also slightly ironic because my early experiences moderating talkbacks were for plays, especially working with new plays that were in the workshop phase. But of course, surrounding me are the folks whose voices you are most used to and are much more interested in hearing than mine. So for those of you joining us for the first time on the rare visual version of this show, let's do a quick round of introductions, starting this direction.
Ooh.
Keep it spicy.
Hi, I'm Seth. You know me as River.
Hi, I'm Tiana Wren Hansen. I play Agent Rowan.
I'm Joseph. I'm Ross this time.
I'm Dan. I'm the handler.
I'm Ben Sislowski. I'm Ari, or now Ruben.
And unfortunately, we are not joined tonight by the last member of our cast, Christy, who plays Agent Reagan. There's no conspiracy to this. There was just a scheduling conflict, and she's unable to be here. We're gonna miss her. We hope you guys miss her too. She will be with us in spirit.
Mm-hmm.
But we are incredibly glad to be joined by all of you, our wonderful listeners and supporters. We are so excited to flip on the work lights, lift a small section of the curtain, and reveal a tiny glimpse behind the scenes of how this exciting and wonderful story comes together. First, a few guidelines for those of you joining us in the chat tonight, which I need to make sure I can see on my screen. I did not resize my windows yet. There we go. This is a spoiler-full zone for anything that has occurred in the podcast through Interlude 7.5. So if you're not fully caught up and you don't want to know about anything that happened in the last season, mute the tab, put us in the background for views, and go play your favorite video game. To help us better find your questions in the chat, if you want to drop any new questions, please put a big capital letter Q at the beginning of your message. It helps me find it when I'm quick glancing. Please don't spam questions. We may already have a version of your question in our pre-written queue, or it might pair nicely with a topic we haven't gotten to yet. Patience is a virtue. We will do our best to get to as many questions as possible in our limited time, and I will do my best to watch for questions in the chat. If I don't get to them, I am sorry, and you are still appreciated. It's just hard to multitask. And, of course, while you have been granted clearance for portions of this debrief, there is some knowledge that even now is unknowable to the human mind. So RSL reserves the right to decline to answer any question for any reason without explanation. After all, we do have to keep some secrets. With those guidelines in mind, please feel free to add any questions to the chat, or just chat amongst yourselves as you listen to us talk. Additionally, true to my ongoing title as professional killjoy and ruiner of all fun, I also have the authority of ASL to impose a ban on spoilers. So if you ask a question about things that might still be in play for future seasons, it's probably not going to get asked. You should just listen all the way through the end of the credits if you want hints at what's coming up next. At this point, I would like to take a moment to thank everyone I know of who submitted questions in advance, whether or not we are going to ask them. And that is Leanna, Danny, Deebles, Skylar, Josh, Alan, Brian, members of the cast themselves, and my personal forever MVP, Agent Harold. Yes, little round of applause. Thank you all. We may not have asked your question at all, or your question may have been, in this case, frequently was heavily rephrased, sorry, and folded in with questions that were already written or that were asked by others. But you all informed the direction that these questions took, even when you were clearly trolling me specifically, and you know who you are, and you're very much appreciated regardless. So.
Was it Harold?
No.
It had to be Harold.
No, Harold doesn't troll me. Harold gives me a syllabus, which is why she's my forever MVP. So let's start off with, let's start at the very beginning. Season 7, dramaturgy. Hashtag, this season was cursed.
Curse Ed.
Yeah.
Cursed. So cursed. So this is a little bit of, when we talk about lifting the curtain, and sorry, I'm just going to continue talking, but you guys can feel free to popcorn in as you want. The King in Yellow, some of you may have picked up, was supposed to be season 6. This entire plotline was supposed to be last season. However, there was a 3 to 4 month span where we couldn't get all 6 cast members together at the same time to record, which is how the season 6 you got, Kaleidoscope ended up happening to 12 Ancestors because we couldn't get everyone together. And I think Tiana and I were yelling at each other in somebody's kitchen.
Yours. We were walking around the island.
We were yelling in my kitchen, and I was like, what if you guys did a season where you didn't all have to be in the same place at the same time? And so that's how that happened.
It turned out great.
A lot of excellent ideas either come from me and Alondra yelling at each other or me and Dan yelling at each other.
Yeah, pace around your kitchen more, folks. It's a great way to solve problems.
Or you and I drinking together.
Also that.
There's some wild ideas. Sometimes Seth just says something quietly and it's on record, and then
we all go, what?
things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in addition to all that, so that's where that started. Once we did finally get to the point where everybody to get together, we had about a 50% cancellation rate where day of problems killed the recording.
Yeah.
In total, it took us 18 weeks to record 15 episodes, which is actually only 7 or 8 recording sessions. So there's some fun math for you in case you're wondering what it's like trying to produce a podcast.
Yeah.
And then as you all witnessed, we started the season actually really strong. I think we had 3 episodes fully in the can, and the 4th was in edits when we started releasing episodes. And then by the time we got to episode 7, life had caught up with us so hard that we had to add an intermission, as you all may remember. Now, conveniently, we had already kind of seen that coming, and there was a natural break point in it that allowed Tiana to get a little bit.
But an intermission in something that has to deal with a play? I mean, that's...
Look, we got really lucky with that. It timed out super well. We had already planned for that to be a shift in the theme music and in the cover art, so it worked really nicely to just do a little pause there. But it was...
We were still workshopping.
Well, and we saw it come in far enough in advance that we all sort of looked at each other and went, if I tried to and it was on my end because I got work. Yay, I was working and getting paid. Love it. Mm-hmm. However...
This is what happens when you get working professionals doing something like this for fun.
Yeah.
So, again, we really, truly appreciate you all sticking with us and just rolling with the punches, because Teresa's, no one was more upset about taking a break than we were.
Than I was.
Ren. But it really came out for the best, and honestly, we ended up with a much better show because of it, because we were able to take the time to... I keep saying we... I'm wearing a crown. It's the royal we. Because Ren was able to take the time that Faye needed to keep the podcast up to the standards that Faye has set for herself. So that's... that I just wanted to address and bring up because for the last 6 months we keep making cursed jokes, and if you've picked up on that, you might be like, "What are they talking about?" That is what we are talking about.
We have our own emoji for it.
Yeah, Alondra made us an emoji for it.
Yeah, we'll share the emoji art in the Discord at some point. We might be doing, this is a slight teaser because we haven't totally decided. We might be doing some sort of fundraiser limited edition merch with our Cursed logo on it at some point in the future here. But yeah.
The curse thing didn't just end with getting...
Oh no.
Getting episodes and stuff recorded. Normally, I like to wear clothes, t-shirts or something that's thematic. Right. And so I had ordered a shirt, an amazing shirt from Arkham Bazaar. I love their stuff. It's fantastic. It's just a small operation. And they were like, cool, we're going to deliver it to my house in Phoenix on Wednesday. It's today. I'm in the Bay Area. I can't get the t-shirt. So I'm like, all right, no problem. I then decide on Friday, I'm going to go ahead and order a t-shirt off of Amazon. Really nice shirt. I did it right before I went to bed. I woke up and it tried to charge an old card that was on there, so it got denied. And they said by the time they would get it to me, if I change the payment would be Wednesday to my house in Phoenix. So I was like, you know what? It's just a sign. The king doesn't want me to wear the shirt. So I'm wearing a lovely
we
pink.
offered.
We did offer to have it get delivered
know.
here, but at that point it was like, no, you just lean into the joke.
Yeah.
So on Sunday, while we're talking about this, I ordered one and got it in time.
But I have this fancy new.
It's a lovely flannel.
Flannel, which I'm very, 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 very fond of. So
Everybody's, still appropriately thematic per our theme rules. But yeah, no, the curse has followed us. We're still trying to figure out why. So who knows? There might be more King in Yellow content coming your way. 'Cause, he does not seem to want to let us rest.
Yeah, we know what the procedure is for breaking the curse of the Scottish play. We need to figure out what it is for the King in Yellow play.
No, the problem is we can't do that.
Fair.
We'll
We
get to
sacrifice prima donnas.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh shit!
Anyway.
In this group, I think that's me.
It's either you or me, man.
Yeah.
sorry, you're out. we need her.
Whoa!
No, it's true. You need fair more than me.
There's only one editor, so
Yep.
Sorry, you
Love you, buddy, but
Reasonable
true.
point.
weirdest plot armor.
I'll take it.
All right. Well, now that we've talked a little bit about how the play gets cut, let's start at the beginning of this saga, and let's briefly talk about the Patron game.
Yes.
So we actually started off this season with our two-part
So long.
Patron game.
It was a year and a half ago now.
We started off the season with the Patron game. I could just read what I wrote, the thing I yell at Thomas and Ezra every week on this channel. We started off the season with a Patron game, which was based on John Wick's Calling the King scenario. And the player characters in that game also ended up being our missing NPCs that RSL was sent to look for. So this question, which was inspired by one asked by Deebles, who actually was one of the patrons who played in that game, in what ways, if any, did having the NPCs start as PCs affect the direction of the story and the fates of those characters? This is mostly a Dan question.
it made it easy for me because I was able to re-listen to the Patron game, hear how the characters were played, and adjust how I was going to run the NPCs. So you guys did the heavy lifting, and I stole it. It was as simple as that.
For us, obviously, Ren heard it for editing,
No,
but
I didn't.
No,
Oh, no,
those
that's
Patron
right.
games don't get edited.
Well, they do, but I make a very specific point of not listening to the Patron games
That's
that,
right.
that precede a season before we start
That's right,
playing.
it was edited after you guys
Yes,
started
I
playing.
made
So-
a very specific point of not knowing.
Yeah,
Joseph was the only one besides Dan who knew.
Which we will
we
get to.
didn't
Sorry.
No, you're right.
hear any of it until you all did. Mm-hmm. So
Well, a little before, but yeah.
Yeah, but we were playing the whole thing not knowing any of that stuff except for Joseph and Dan, and going, who are these people? What? Why do we get?
Well, I think what I'm getting at with this question though is less because like your experience with us as NPCs was still just as NPCs. It didn't actually really affect in the same way. But it is interesting to hear from Dan. Like, does having a player involved with creating a character, does that change? Did that change any of the things you were planning to do, or was it simply that you're like, oh, so much less brain power that I have to use because I've got something handed to me?
So when I gave them, so the characters were pre-generated. So they received a little bio about the character, what they liked and what they didn't like, and kind of any interactions that they may have had with other characters. Because hey, some of them may have had a relationship with one of the other NPCs, and how they reacted really helped me really place them in our game, in the RSL game, where they were at, where they were going to, end up. Like your character, ended up kind of, being the star out in the middle of, of a one-person show.
And Olga wound up being a super paranoid, stay away from me, mom friend.
Yeah. So it certainly helped. I stole your stuff. That's what we're here for. Yes.
And then, of course, another feature of our patron games. So for anybody who's new here and doesn't know, one of the perks of being a high-level patron in our Patreon is that we Dan will run games that have patrons as players, and frequently those games end up tying into part of the season, or being involved with something that's going on with RSL. And another piece of that is that we always have one of the cast members as a player in those games as well. And so for Calling the King, it was Joseph. So for you, in so much as you can remember, did that have any effect on you and how you approached the main season?
I did try to not let it influence character decisions. An interesting thing for me is it was so long ago. I actually played Ross after I'd recorded the Patron game. I didn't record any of the Ross.
Oh, that's right. That was before Ross had even.
I hadn't even. I think I maybe was done playing Rory, but I hadn't recorded. We hadn't recorded Ruth yet. And we had already recorded the Patron game.
So many R's.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of those is on you.
Yeah.
But yeah,
You took Ruth at this point.
So yeah, it was so long ago that it did help a little bit for me not remembering too many of the details, remembered the gist of it. And I just tried to not let it affect Ross's decisions.
It always made me smile when we were recording the RSL portion. And you would remember something because on camera you'd be like, "Oh yeah!" A light, your posture would go up, and a light bulb would go off. Mm-hmm. And now I get to see what it looks like when that happens to me. I'm like, "Oh," because you would remember stuff, and it made me smile.
Oh yeah, that happened.
Awesome. Honestly, I did not have a whole lot of questions about the Patron game. That was kind of the big one. Is there anything else interesting that you wanted to bring up? I just think I thought this was a very interesting scenario with this.
I do actually have something. When you play con games or with the Patron games, you're playing with people that have generally never played together before. Mm-hmm. With the Patron game, this last Patron game, everybody clicked quickly. Yeah. Everybody fell into character. Mm-hmm. There was a really good chemistry for all of the players, and that was really nice to see. I didn't have to struggle to kind of pull everybody together. Everybody leapt in with both feet, and thank you for that, because it makes my job easier, helping tell a story. But we are performing for you guys and whatnot, and you got the patrons aren't always somebody that's trained or does this regularly like we do, and you guys killed it, and it was great. I'm so happy with how it came out.
Although I am now remembering that one of the benefits, but also detriments of having a full table of actually somewhat experienced TTRPG players as your patrons is that they really did not want to take the bait because they knew that was a bad idea. I remember, because I'm having a flashback to getting texts, I think, from Ren being like, they haven't done the thing yet. They're 2 hours in, and I'm like, it's going to be a 3-episode game, Ren. Hope you're ready. But it's kind of a fun and unique angle to approach things from, and especially for a season as weird as this to kind of lead off with that was
weird.
We honestly probably could have done a 3rd episode, but we had to end it at some point.
Yeah.
The cliffhanger was a cliffhanger. For that Patron, the way it was great.
On purpose.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
We were going to get, get to something like that.
But also, quick shout out, thank you to all of the people who sent me a chance of We Wear No Mask. There's a whole lot of people who sent me that based off of what I pulled from Dan chanting it to get that layered in. And I appreciate the folks who sent that in. Some of you are watching, some of you will hear this later, and I truly appreciate it.
Crowdsource your Foley. It's faster.
It's much faster. Or show up to choir with a hand recorder and say go.
Yeah, we've done that a few times. So I think with that, now we're going to get into the season proper. And unfortunately, I've set myself up for immediate trolling with the first question, so I had to caveat it. This is just a show of hands question for the table. Unrelated to this podcast or the character they were playing, Ben, who is already familiar with the King in Yellow, either from reading the Chambers collection, from pop culture references, etc. Okay. So Ben, Ren, and Dan, as usual, already knew what was up a little bit. And then
That's pushing it.
You knew what the character was, or you'd heard of the character, and then Joseph and Seth, you had a little bit of passive knowledge. Okay.
I'd basically heard of it.
Yeah. This is the King in Yellow is very popular within the mythos, like the people who are very into the mythos in a lot of ways. Most recently, it's gotten a little, Carcosa and the King in Yellow had a little bit of a bump because of the first season of True Detective. And so it's a little more in the cultural consciousness, but in a very different and specific way. So let's start with a question that's come up a few times, actually. So the creators of Delta Green, Arc Dream Publishing, have a published campaign called Impossible Landscapes, which is also based around the King in Yellow and Carcosa. This came up, I think, in the Talkback for either season 3 or season 4. It was one of the first ones I led. It had just come out, and I remember it getting asked, because we were talking about other scenarios that might someday show up in the podcast. It got asked, and Dan said, it's a great campaign, we're never going to use it. And this season actually drew inspiration from a different supplement called Fragments of the King, as well as Dan's own original storyline that he wrapped around that. So Dan, I would love for you to share a little bit about what your ideas were for Carcosa and the King in Yellow, and why Fragments of the King was a better fit than Impossible Landscapes would be.
Impossible Landscapes does have flashbacks to different eras of time, and that doesn't fit our podcast. It's a great, and seriously, it's a fantastic campaign, well thought out. I've read through it and cribbed some ideas here and there. I really liked the Yellow Sign book that was put out by John Wick and John Wick Presents, and with that there was the supplemental item, which was the Fragments of the King. Luckily, I'm friends with the majority of the authors of the books, of the chapters, and reading that, it was different takes on the King in Yellow. Everybody, all of the game designers and authors and fiction writers have their own take on things. So I like the idea of different views and different concepts of this strange, weird science play, sci-fi play, happening. And everything was compiled in a nice and neat item. Sadly, it's not available for purchase right at the moment in time, but I'm working on getting that fixed. We'll let everybody know about that.
It's really good.
Oh, it's excellent.
And I chose that because I had the ability to be flexible with it and make it mine. Where if we had done another, like the pre-published campaign, Impossible Landscapes, I'd have to stick to it. The smaller scenarios, I can really, meld and change to my own, kind of like what, I did with Reverberations. Reverberations isn't written anything like how it came out, but it worked. But I was able to do that without, making, wholesale changes to the Impossible Landscapes. So I did use some of the stuff. And I like the King. Astor's a fun dude.
I remember when you first came on, we were talking about it, and you were like, my favorite Mythos character is the King in Yellow, so he's going to turn up at some point. And that was 3 years ago now.
You've been hinting
for a while.
Yeah.
That it would happen eventually.
Yeah, like Ross getting a yellow sign on his forehead while he was at Burning Man. Or, excuse me, the burn, or the thing in the desert. Sorry. We cannot, for legally reasons, call it Burning Man.
We made it 2 whole talkbacks before it became a problem. Good job, team.
Team?
Yeah, nobody slipped until now. Good job, team. Take the compliment.
Okay.
It's us. We were going to mess up eventually.
But yeah, well, no, and again, Dan has been talking about this, as Ren pointed out, since Dan joined the podcast, which is also why we knew that we needed to make sure we had a full team contingent to be able to do that season and not try to franken season around absences. That was not gonna fly. Let me see where I am. So following up on that, especially following on the events of last season, there have been a lot of shifts in the dynamics of RSL. So I would love to hear from our 4 returning agents, Ross, Reagan, River, and Rowan, how
Our names.
how going into the season was different, how your characters have continued to change and evolve. And this is mostly thinking about coming into this season, because we're going to have another question about the end of the season and some of the developments from there. Any of you on that side of the table have a thought or want to start?
Well, I did try to, consciously think about, what did we rely on Rooster for that would be missing this season? Mm-hmm. And so things like going into Carcosa without a lot of guns.
Or any of the other things that he had in his bag.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, I did deliberately make the choice that in this situation, we're not prepared for what we're encountering.
Yeah, it was very different going in and looking at the situation and being like, we can't count on the duffel bag. For Rowan coming in, she's definitely being a little bit more at arm's length now because, it's no secret she and Roos are very good friends. So it was very much someone that I cared about a lot died, and now I have to deal with that, and I'm not going to therapy about it because I don't want to deal with it.
Very healthy.
No one ever said cops were healthy.
Yeah, for me it was especially, I guess, after like the burn and just kind of happening to Ross to some extent. It was interesting to kind of go a little bit like more prepared, especially as not like after Rooster left, I think Ross is taking a little bit more seriously than he maybe had been before. But it's definitely interesting going to, especially with Carcosa, we literally stumbled into Carcosa.
Like you do.
Yeah,
Yes.
as you do. So it was like, in that sense, it was hard to prepare for that. So I think maybe there are some things that going forward, maybe we'll see more. But yeah.
And I had asked Christy about this in advance. I gave her a slightly different phrasing of the question because this was earlier than I had written all these questions down. But one of the things that she said is that she really enjoys that the Reagan and Ross duo haven't fallen into so much of a niche. And so it's been nice being able to play kind of a floater and to have this established game where you have folks available to fit the needs of the moment, but it also, because Delta Green is so grounded in real life mechanics, you can see that shift happening.
Yeah.
And that definitely, we felt a lot of that shift and saw a lot of that shift in this season because you had a very specific sort of like niche archetype within the team dynamic that was not there. And so it changed the approach going in a little bit more than it might have otherwise.
Especially now without Rory and Rooster.
Yeah.
There's like a big hole there now.
Yeah, which does get referenced at the end of the season, but we're not there yet, I think.
Yeah, we are correct. We are not there. But with that, we can now jump over, and we did, of course, add a new character. So Ben, you came in with Ari. Would you like to share a little bit? I love you. I'm always going to pick on you, though, because you're very good at talking, which I love. But,
My second grade teacher said the same thing.
Yeah.
Very good at talking.
Do you want to share a little bit about how you came up with Ari and, why you chose the character that you did? And then maybe we can briefly touch on what you spent the first 3 episodes doing while everybody else was recording.
So I've talked before about how Rooster was not my idea as a character, but I fell in love with playing him, especially because he was so unlike me, and then he became more like me over time. I wanted someone where I could use my nerdiness and stuff, some things a little closer to home and pull from my own experience. But that came second. The first thing was I've always really enjoyed the trope of the agents have to go to the asylum to get the person. Sean Connery's character in The Rock, John Noble in Fringe, Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs, that trope I enjoyed. So I threw that to Dan first, and he goes, oh yeah, no, that has to be this one.
We're doing it now.
Yeah. And so I kind of had this idea of, I said, he knows something about whatever's happening. Dan said, okay, it's this. Here, you've read Chambers before, have Chambers, The King in Yellow. I go, yeah. Here's John Wick's book. Go.
And everybody else and all the other, and I just
Yeah.
unloaded as much King in Yellow information to him as possible.
So I had a ton of research that I had before I even knew anything about Ari the character. And I just leaned into basically I leaned into Milo Thatch from Atlantis Lost Empire. Was my go-to, and still is my go-to character, with a bit of Samwise Gamgee. And that was Ari.
This is my special interest, and it is the only thing that I want to talk about.
To the point where we had to install an off button.
So you, of course, were not in the recording for the first 2 episodes, and you came in at the end of the 4th episode this season. So I think you were in for part of that recording session, but not the whole thing.
No, he was
I
there
was
for the
there.
whole
Oh,
thing.
you were there for the whole thing? Okay.
Yeah, so I watched them, and I was making faces and in the chat while muted about when they saw TV Man.
Okay.
And then
I made him turn off his video and stay muted because he was making faces at us.
listen to the outtakes. You'll hear bits from that episode. But we wanted the idea of not hiding the fact I was going to come back, but leaving that I'm gone. So I was there for that, and then came in. But I was there that whole session for the 2 minutes I was in the episode.
Rooster was such a beloved character. And when Rooster died, and we know that Ben was coming back, but I was like,
We
man,
at the table.
yeah, we all knew.
Mm-hmm.
We all knew at the last talkback even. And we had I was just at the point where I was like, Ben's voice is recognizable. But
Another thing my second grade teacher said.
I wanted to make sure that we created space between Rooster's voice and Ari's voice. And besides also Ben taking on affectation of raising his voice and picking up his voice tempo a little bit.
Which you asked me to do.
Yeah, to change it just a
find
little
something.
bit.
And I've asked you to keep it because you were going to drop it at the end of this. It's like, no, I actually really like you having a character voice.
And then you asked if I wanted to, how easy it would be to hang on to. I'm like, no, I like this. I'm gonna keep it.
It works really well. It's a good oral distinction.
It makes it a lot easier to tell when I make the offhand comment
Yes.
whether it's in character voice or
That
not.
is why all of my D&D characters have accents. It's so you can tell if I am asking as the player or the character.
Mm-hmm.
But you were saying, Dan.
We wanted to create. I wanted to create space there. So it was like, all right, Ben, I'm sorry, you're not going to be in the first recording session. I want you to come in on the second half of the second recording session, because then our listeners will have 3 weeks. It ends up being more, but 3 weeks of hearing our son, not knowing you're coming back. And when they hear your voice, they'll recognize you're back. But it's got enough time for you to establish a new character, kind of like a reset button.
And I was just going to say, with timing, I just want to say, so much like at the in the season 5 talkback about the burn, we already knew Rooster was dead. They had just recorded that session the week that the talkback happened, and it was a hard you cannot allude to anything.
Yep.
At the last talkback for season 6, when you guys were all reeling from the death of Rooster, we were about halfway through recording season 7. Ari had already shown up, and we had a very hard line, we are not gonna talk about what Ben's coming with. We're not gonna allude to it. We're not gonna hint at anything. We were hoping that we could try to psych everybody out into questioning whether Ben was coming back or not. I don't think we succeeded very well, but everyone committed to the bit. And that's all you
We had
can
enough
ask
people
for.
who asking us, is he coming back, that I feel like it worked.
I was very excited to be Katie Sackhoff. And if you get that reference, I'm great. I'm not spoiling it for you.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was a little bit of a challenge, but a fun challenge. And it made for kind of a fun reveal moment when Ben finally showed up and appeared at the credits and all of that sort of thing.
And it was just interesting seeing the dynamic with just Reagan and Ross and River and Rowan. It was very different. Yeah.
It was. And
It was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not going to speak for Christy at all, but I loved being able to play off, like having her to play off of in a completely different like scenario and setup, because it was like Rowan and Reagan like vibe really, really well and have very different approaches to the same idea, and I love it. It's a lot of fun to play with.
Yeah. I don't have a good segue, so we're going to jump over to one of my popcorn questions. Popcorn questions, the rule is I'm going to ask the question and nobody's allowed to explain their answer. They can only present it. This one came from, or was a variant on something that Danny asked that I think is very lovely. What was your character's childhood pet? Or if they didn't have one, what was their dream pet? We'll start on this side of the table this time.
Ari wanted Cerberus.
Great.
For me?
Pick an NPC.
I told you, pick an NPC.
You had prep time.
No, I didn't think this was going to get to me, though.
Why not? I do this to you every talkback.
Oh, I got it. The television head, he wanted an iPhone.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Like Pet Rock.
No, it's a little version
Or
of
an
him.
iPad.
It's like a
an iPad
Tamagotchi.
mini.
Yeah, iPad mini, yeah.
Keep it alive.
Ross did not have a pet growing up, but he wanted a dog, and now that he's grown up, his mom has a dog, and he's upset about it.
Wait until he was out of the house and then
Yeah.
got the dog. Yeah, that tracks.
Noted.
There were a couple of dogs that came through the Hodgson house. Rowan always wanted a corgi.
Nice.
Like,
Or River.
like if he does.
River wanted a tarantula, but his parents said, no way.
Hey, lots of desire for pets, not a lot of pets to be had. Interesting. All right, let's pop back into the season proper. I have to find my spot. So, this season was a wildly different mission from previous seasons in that it was presented as a very straightforward missing persons investigation from the start. And then, of course, we'll get into how that spiraled into something entirely different regardless. But did that come across as like harder or easier than a traditional RSL mission? And with the slow devolution into like the rules of logic not being what you guys are used to, you know, did that, did it seem harder? Like, you could answer this from a character perspective or a player perspective. Did it seem harder, easier, on par, just different?
It's always a little bit interesting with, I won't speak for Christy, but for like me as Ross, not being in government, getting roped into these things is always a little bit interesting. It's like, wait, okay, that's a missing person. Okay, yeah. Or like the burn, like, okay, we're investigating something that makes sense. Like, we can kind of rope anyone in there. But it was different than enough from like the burn and even, well, Kaleidoscope is its whole thing.
It was a special
Yeah.
snowflake.
Like, but it was a very
love
different, I do too. A unique way of looking at it, and it just interesting. It was fun, like seeing what excuse you would have to rope Ross and Reagan into it. But I think it worked.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I went in with a very specific mission on this one as a player. I had my like 5 pages of notes out, and I just said, be a lore dump who is totally out of depth. So the whole missing persons part never even was like part of my or Ari's reckoning. Like, that wasn't the point for my perspective. So in that way, it was like most of Brewster's missions where he's like, what the heck am I doing here?
So different tactical reason, but same baseline. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, for him, it was for Rooster, it was keep the team safe, let them figure out stuff because they're smart. This was, I know everything, and
No, you
none of it
don't.
makes sense.
Yeah.
That was actually a really nice change for me, because traditionally as a GM, they're the ones that do the info dumping, right? I had a player to be like info dump button, like the easy button, like, and let Ben go. Even though Ben had all of the information that I had fed to him and stuff that he had looked up on his own or created on his own, the shit that came out of his mouth, I ran with, whether it was part of my notes or not. I'm like, it's mine now, because it was, a scholar doing research, and it's about the different variations. So I don't know all the variations. You don't know the variations. The character does, though. Even if they're not right or they are wrong, who knows?
There were points where there was one where I said something, and then I paused and go, "Oh shoot, that's not right." And he goes, "No, that's great."
Yeah.
And that was part of it, was leaning into the obfuscation, not just this is what it is, but this is what it could be, and maybe or maybe not, depending on how you look at it. Just going back to academia was fun.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess for me, it was kind of the typical mission. You start out with no leads and you wait until something happens. And this mission, we had so many leads that we just kind of said, we're going to ignore most of these and see what happens.
We're going to pull on this thread and see where it goes, and then we'll follow that. For Rowan, it was interesting because she is a cop, and so a missing persons case is very much up her alley. And so if she had not been told that this is a Green Triangle mission, she would have approached it just as strictly a missing persons case. Being told that it was a Green Triangle mission meant that she did approach it with the mindset of, okay, this is a missing persons case, but there's something else that made them call us in. So she was generally handling it like a missing persons case until we found out more about the play, and then it was click brain over into Agent Rowan instead of Special Agent Hodgson.
Sure.
So it was interesting playing that out and playing that click.
Again, I don't have a good segue for this one, but now we're going to get into some of the more thematic elements of this season, because it's really kind of all we have to talk about is the thematic elements of this season. So we're going to start with another brief kind of show of hands round robin. This season had a lot to do with theater, both literally and metaphorically. So I just want to do a quick, this is the one sentence breakdown around the table of what is your, as a player, what is your background with or experience with theater? I don't need your entire resume, I'm not casting, but just, a couple quick sentences about what your experience is. We'll start with Ben.
Hardcore high school stuff, and then stuff in the SCA where I've actually acted with Seth.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who don't know, the SCA is the Society for Creative Anachronism, and we have several
Creative
people.
Anarchy.
Yes.
Also that. We have several listeners and several players who participate in that. Reenactment of the past as it should have been, not necessarily as it was. Just defining that, because we throw that term around a lot, and I realize that maybe not everyone comes from an area where it's so prevalent. Dan, your theater background.
High school theater, both front of house, on stage, and when I was in college, did theater, I was primarily stage management.
Very minimal, actually. I did theater only senior year of high school because I was busy with schoolwork, and then in college didn't do any theater at all because I was pharmacy school. So no time. And then now that I'm working as a pharmacist, I also have no time. I've done a couple things with community theater before I moved up to the Bay Area. But one of them was while I was in between jobs. So
That'll do it. I came into theater kind of late. I wasn't a high school theater kid because homeschooled. But when I did get in, I got into community theater in a big way, and then got my degree in theater performance at UAF. I actually moved down here specifically to pursue being an actor, and then ended up behind the camera. Like you do.
It happens.
Yeah, I was in the marching band.
Band kid.
Oh, I also act in the SCA, and then Dan and Seth and I have played together on stage before.
What did you play? What do you play?
I played baritone or euphonium.
Oh, nice.
That
makes sense.
That's how you met Leonive, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. But you were in marching band.
Yes.
And then...
So yes, no theater. In college, we did some. We put on a show. So there were theater elements to that, but didn't really seriously get into acting until in the SCA, quite a bit later, and when I discovered that almost all my friends were theater nerds.
Yes. And because this is going to come up later, my first acting role was at 2 months old when I played Baby Jesus, because I am a fall baby.
As you do.
And I have been in theater ever since then. I hold a degree in play development and dramaturgy as a bachelor's and an MFA in playwriting, and I have worked in theater for close to 3 decades at this point.
Dramaturgy, that's the name of the season.
Yeah, it is. Weird. And I wasn't the one who named this season. Christy actually was.
Yep.
But I will also say, Christy and I know each other through theater. She also has a minor in theater and has been done a lot of things in theater throughout her career as well. So, yeah, varying amounts of theatrical experience, and I think we all watch theater.
Oh,
Why,
yes.
why did I choose the theater, theater themed scenario? Because I might be a masochist and realize that, if I get something wrong, they're going to hammer me on it. Luckily, I knew enough and I was able to, outsource enough information that it came across pretty okay.
Or else it's in outtakes.
Or, it's like listening to someone play a cop if you're actually a cop, or someone play a military member who's never been a military member, and someone like Kate listens to it and goes, "No, honey."
Or my personal pet peeve, when they use the paddles in every CPR.
Oh my God.
scenario.
I'm going to add that to the popcorn questions for next time, is like, what's your personal pet peeve based on your career that you see other people playing, so we can all acknowledge, because no one can be a true subject matter expert in something that they don't already know. I'm going to read this is directly from Agent Harold. I did not rephrase this one, and I just want to acknowledge that because I didn't have a better way to rephrase it. I also want to interject that I have tried to credit and reference specific questions that I got from specific people. The exception to that is Agent Harold. So just assume that like anything where I don't reference who submitted it, it's like a 50-50 coin flip between I came up with it or it came from Agent Harold, just for full acknowledgement. This is the question that she presented directly. Theater and TTRPG seem to have a lot to say to and about each other. How do you conceive of the relationship between the two, and how did this influence how you approached this season? And I could not think of a better way to phrase that.
Agent Harold, I love you.
You're amazing.
So,
Can you ask the question one more time?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because there were multiple layers.
Yep. Theater and TTRPGs seem to have a lot to say to and about each other. How do you conceive of the relationship between the two, and how did this influence how you approached this season? It's okay if the answer is, I didn't think about it until just now when you asked, but,
So, role-playing games is one of the only mediums of acting where you get an immediate response. You can get an immediate response in theater, but you know what? You still have to say the next line. You can't necessarily improv. In improv, you can. Stand-up comedy is kind of the similar thing where you get your immediate feedback. There's a few other forms of performances, pro wrestling, where that you get your immediate feedback and you can make changes on the fly. But role-playing games is just, it is another form of theater. You're performing. Your audience is not necessarily people out there, though we do have an audience, which is, quite rare. But most folks, when you sit down to play, your audience are your friends and yourself. And it's very powerful because you can get into themes that are very personal, that are unique. You can change things. You can opt out of scenes like we do with safety tools as necessary, which isn't always available, say in theater. They're intricately tied together. It's just another form. I've thought about it a bit.
When I talk about this show to people who may not know anything about TTRPGs, I always call it an improv radio play that has some dice to determine how some things happen. But yeah, I've actually talked to you about this. Mm-hmm. I think one of the interesting parts is TTRPGs are theater. Not just us, but anyone I've talked to who plays wants to be a better player to make the experience better. Mm-hmm. Because the audience are the actors, which I think is a really interesting thing. It's the only place that can happen, I think. So, yeah, that's my stuff.
Well, the theater I've done, I found I have tried both scripted and a little bit of sort of improv. I am much better and more comfortable with scripted stuff, and I think that the TTRPG it's definitely improv, but it has enough of that structure that it's more accessible for me. So I don't know if I've brought any theater experience to the game, but I think probably playing the game has made me a better actor.
Yeah. No, yeah, I would agree. I don't feel like I changed too much of my approach to this season in particular, or because I was theater. I think that's more just like a player versus like the DM.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, for me, TTRPG and performance has always been really closely tied because unlike some people at this table, I haven't been playing for forever. I played a few things before coming into Quests and Chaos, but I never considered myself a TTRPG player really until I started doing this. And I have always said, much like you, Seth, I am so much better at scripted than I am at improv, and doing this has made me a better improv performer. Specifically for this season, not anything specific, but I have thought a lot about how like performance and TTRPGs play in the same space. It gives you a place to be raw and open, and also then be able to step back and say, and that's the character.
And I think it's interesting, just to interject myself into the conversation a little bit, it is fascinating to me to hear from all of you guys because where I look at it is the intersection of storytelling, because I'm primarily a writer, and the scripted versus unscripted. Like I do not do well with improv. I do not enjoy participating in it. I do not enjoy watching it particularly, but I love TTRPG, and I think it does kind of speak to that, like what Seth was saying. There is enough structure and enough of that like storytelling mindset where you have to have beats, you have to have arcs that tie in, but it has the freedom outside of not being bound to adhering to the playwright's words or the playwright's intention. You're imbuing yourself into the story and you're making it as a living script that is happening in the moment instead of something that is set down. And I think both have incredibly valuable places as storytelling structures, because that is inherently what this is about. Like when you are presenting for an external audience aside from your table, there is always a different level of performance that is going to be required at a TTRPG table.
See, I think that's interesting because I'm also primarily a writer and new to TTRPGs in the last few years. And something, the more I play in different things, the more I'm having to do is put away my writer brain because I think in arcs. When I'm looking at a story, whether it's plot arcs, character changes and arcs, and I'm having the experience of having to put that away and live in the moment of things, living in the moment and the past versus looking forward and planning ahead. So I actually have a very different relationship with TTRPGs from my writer perspective, which I think was my big mistake the first time I GM'd. And I've had to, hopefully gotten better.
Probably not for this table, but just to tag on that, then I'll go to you, Dan, because I see you have a response too. I wonder how much of that is the difference between you were a prose writer and I was a script writer. So everything about me is the immediacy of dialogue and conversation, whereas you had a lot more background involving having to describe a scene and craft that scenario and craft that arc in a different... And it's just, neither good nor bad, but just I wonder how much the tactical approach to the two makes a difference.
I don't think there's as much difference necessarily, but I'd love to talk to you about that separately.
That might be for some bonus content. Alondra and Ben go to the bar later.
I'm down.
I've only been playing since 1991, which was just last week.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still a new role player.
Everybody raise your hand if you were born after 1991.
I turned 5 in 91.
I was 4.
Okay. Anyway, but yes, wonderful. Did anybody have anything else to add to that? I have a riff on that, but I want to let.
Yeah, I think the only thought that I want to add to that is that what makes TTRPGs better for my brain than improv is that there is a director.
Sure.
You have a GM. You have someone who knows what the overarching story is supposed to look like and adjusts as things happen. I think that helps me at least quite a lot, because it's like, as a player, I can play the story and watch for the hooks that I know are coming and try to tag onto them as best as I can. And then as a GM, that helps me with the overarching brain of it.
Yeah. There is something nice about knowing that someone is in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Now, that someone might be blindfolded with no map and sitting backwards, but they're technically in the driver's seat.
Jesus, take the wheel. Wrong wheel!
Okay.
Well, the problem is they don't know what genre it is until the actors do something.
You didn't tell me I needed a Class C license for this game.
I wanted it to be a heist, not Benny Hill.
Same. It's the same thing.
It's the same
Players
thing.
are involved. It's a Benny Hill show.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. They're all heists, but the players pick the music.
That's what I was going for.
And they always pick the same music.
It's always Benny Hill or Pink Panther. Pink Panther's a good choice too.
Light of the Bumblebee. So riffing off of this, this was coming from my personal thing. Mostly Ren has heard me talk about, like, I, as a listener, had a hard time this season. And I was interrogating why, and it was because for me, found that I was having to suspend my disbelief in the wrong places. And this comes from having almost 3 decades in theater. Instead of suspending the disbelief, like, the fact that the plants have eyes was not a problem for me. The fact that somebody mispronounced the name of a very well-known theatrical character, I got hung up on, and it distracted me, right? Like, and I was like, oh, I'm honing in on the wrong thing. The thing that is bothering me is not the thing that's supposed to bother me, which is the fact that everything's trying to kill them. But stemming out of that experience that I had as a listener, did any of you guys find that your meta understanding of things like TTRPGs or theater, or even things like folklore and mythos, affected the way that you approach this season? I know, like, throughout the season, there are many, many references to the, like, treat it like the rules of fairy, don't eat the food and whatever, which is a very in-character approach. There are certainly characters in this group who would know about those things, but it's also a very meta approach.
Sure.
When you think of the first rule of TTRPGs are you have to do something in order for the story to happen. So I was just curious if any of you guys experienced that, like, at the table, like, getting hung up on your meta knowledge in a way that affected the choices you made. Does anyone want to go before Ben? I'm still going to let you talk. I just want to know if anybody else wants to start.
That's why I raised my hand.
I'll weigh in and say, well, as a player, it was obvious from the beginning that we are going to Carcosa. And
no way around it.
Nope.
So it was kind of okay, how much time are we going to spend running around San Francisco before we get to the main event?
Longer than I expected.
Yeah.
It's about where I expected. I wanted to get the really weird stuff that was creeping into the city. I really wanted to lean on weird this season.
You succeeded.
Yes, I'm very happy with that. But I wanted to have it creep in, kind of like the idea of, hey, there's a theater that's there. No, there's no theater. No, yes, there's a theater there. Look, it's a theater. Oh, there's a theater there. And then it turns into a convenience store, or a hotel that has reviews, Yelp reviews from the 90s, or whatever date that I had.
Great.
That was something.
Yeah, but you've been doing that sort of thing to River for so long.
That's true.
With the Castillos.
Yeah.
That's there.
For me, it's just, okay.
It's a Tuesday.
These Yelp reviews predate the invention of the internet.
And no, Alcor was around in 91.
It was interesting for me because I have, I'm going to say, a lot of surface knowledge of theater, and mostly from like community theater and having a degree in performance, but not doing a whole lot in my performance. I'll go off on that rant someday. But I had a lot of surface knowledge that Rowan wouldn't have. So I had to like pull Ren's brain back a bit from Rowan and be like, okay, well, what does she know? Well, she knows Hamlet. She quotes it frequently. And she knows, fairy tales. So I think she was the one who first said, don't eat the food, treat this like fairy. And so leaning on, I can't use my knowledge because she has no reason to have that. So what is the knowledge that I do have that she can have?
Right. Anybody else on that one?
Well, I think Ben had something.
Okay.
You're allowed to talk now.
Go ahead.
I knew everything and nothing. And so, yes, the meta was, I was constantly looking for connections the way Ari would be and trying to see meta. Okay, what is it that Ari might know that will be helpful in this next scene? That kind of stuff. Or, oh, I could just make something up and it would be great. But the biggest one...
He turned in Ari. Just right there.
He did.
Yeah.
We all saw the click.
Yeah. I told you, Ari is drawing a lot on my academia.
No, your voice even went a little bit higher.
I know,
It's great.
I know, it was weird.
Well, yes, you had a lot of things where, Rooster would say, I don't have a clue. And Ari said, I know exactly what this is, and there are half a dozen different possibilities to explain
I
it.
failed this in high school, and Ari's like, no, I aced that. I got 110 on each test.
Yep.
I did the extra
Teacher told
credit.
me to stop coming because I knew all the answers.
That happened in real life. to me.
Same.
So,
But the big moment for me, meta-wise, was Dan and I talked, why is Ari going to go along with them when they show up? Why are they going to take Hannibal Lecter out of the insane asylum?
I don't think Hannibal Lecter is really the best corollary here. He
But
is a really bad guy, but
That
I
was the one he
understand what
kept
you
pulling
mean.
from.
It's the one of the three that I was pulling from, it's the one I expect most people to know. But I had a plan and then River all of a sudden was like, I think we have to take him with us. And I was like, okay, cool.
I mean, that was totally meta.
Yeah, but it was one of those moments that, sure, it was meta. We all know the character's gonna go with them
Right.
at a certain level, but now how are the characters gonna make it happen?
Yeah, and that was definitely a challenge for me because Rowan was very much like, thank you for all the information, bye now. And was very much like, River, why? What?
Because I can't take notes as fast as he talks.
My shorthand is much better than yours then.
But it is also a great moment of like taking the classic kind of improv TTRPG yes and where it's like one of the biggest suspensions of disbelief in TTRPGs is like you have to take the plot hook. The party has to stay together, not in a don't split the party way, but in the like you all have to agree to do the quest because if you don't do the quest, you don't have a game.
Right.
If you don't agree to go on the quest, then goodbye. I'll see you next week.
It's like rule one of creating a character, make your character have a reason to be on the adventure.
So that's a very that's a very fun way of your fellow players then helping you out with
Yeah.
that, where it's like, oh, like you're prepared to come up with a reason to come along, and they're gonna throw you the bone of being like, okay, fine, I guess we'll take the kid.
Oh no, Ari was just. Can I say this one? Like
I'll let you say this one. Yeah.
the plan I had already was, he was gonna say, oh, you are not leaving me behind on this. And he was just going to check him out and go and be like, yeah, try and keep me back.
He was just gonna puppy dog them.
Yeah.
Be like, no, I'm too interested now, which is also a great tactical option to have in your pocket.
there was a point when Ben and Ari was talking about the drowned cast that I wasn't gonna drown them in mugs and kisses. That came when Ben mentioned it as Ari, and I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I got a little bit of a time for a scene to put in here. That would be
I
great.
had notes.
I mean, that would be a good exclamation point. Let's put that in there. So boom.
All right, let's pull back ever so briefly because this we had a good setup here a little bit ago to jump into this question. There's another quick popcorn question. I believe this one was inspired by Josh. What would your character's favorite stage play or musical be, and what is yours? Again, remember, no explanation.
Yeah.
I just want to know. Let's go in a crazy order. Let's start with Joseph.
I don't know if Ross has a lot of theater background or
valid.
like maybe just surface level knowledge, like basic pop culture knowledge. I think
Cats.
That's horrifying.
I don't know anything. Me, the
Not
player,
the correct response, but
Yeah.
okay.
yeah, like me, the player knows very little about cats. So I know a little bit about theater.
Yeah.
Cats or Phantom.
No, it's Cats because it has to be at Winter Garden Theater.
It's if you don't know anything about theater, your favorite musical is Les Mis.
Yeah, but that was like, and also like compared to everyone else at the table, I knew so little about all the references that were coming up. I was like, oh, that's a theater reference. Like I knew, like I picked up like on the Sweeney Todd one because I was in Sweeney Todd, but it was yeah.
Sorry, we're verging dangerously close to explaining.
Ugh,
So-
sorry.
No, that's fine. So Ross doesn't have one. Does Joseph have a favorite?
Currently Hadestown is one of my favorites.
Ren.
I mean, Rowan's is clearly Hamlet. She quotes it all the time. Mine is a D3 roll between, Les Mis, Into the Woods, or Hadestown.
I got these theater kids numbers. I know what the baseline response
It's not Rent anymore. It was Rent when I was a baby
Thank
theater
God.
person.
River/Seth.
For River, I had already decided to go with Les Mis.
Nice.
And I don't have a preference. Or not a
Did you say
favorite.
musical or
Musical or play.
Okay.
If you have one of each, that is also fine. Because I know they are two different mediums, but I was providing options.
Yeah.
Like maybe Ross doesn't do musicals, but is very into straight plays or something, or gay plays to be. No, I caught myself. It's just what they're called. It's just because it means it doesn't have any music. It has nothing to do with orientation. There are some very queer straight plays there. But what is Ari's favorite player musical, and then what is Ben's?
Ari likes Hadestown.
Okay.
My dream roles have always been Javert from Les Mis, or
We're pretty basic.
I'm a basic bitch. Or Tevye from Fiddler,
Great.
because baritone.
No explanation.
No, there's more to it than that. But
Dan.
So I'm not going to answer for the NPCs because
There's so many of them.
There's just so many of them. And Miss Saigon was amazing, and absolutely love seeing that on Broadway. I love The Foreigner. I stage managed that, but absolute all-time favorite, In the Heights.
Oh, fabulous. Cool. A question from the chat that I will break from because I just happened to glance down. Joseph, who did you play in Sweeney Todd?
I was Anthony, surprising no one.
That absolutely no shocker.
That baby face?
Yeah.
there's a reason that Ari said he'd been in Sweeney Todd.
Adorable.
That was you.
Toss that back at you, Alondra. What's your favorite play?
My longtime favorite play has probably been a coin flip between Arcadia by Tom Stoppard and Amadeus by Peter Shaffer.
Ooh.
Amadeus and Arcadia both changed the way I wrote theater as well as viewed it. Musical is a lot harder of a question because there's a lot more criteria.
Yeah.
Agent Harker explicitly avoids listening to theater or musicals or anything like that.
Surprising no
it's
one.
too traumatizing because of their background that you will never get to find out about. As we got deeper into Carcosa, we had a lot of theatrical cameos. Does anybody have a fun favorite that they want to share? We're going to kind of speed round this question.
The Bear.
The baby. That is the correct answer.
Yeah, no
notes.
Moving on.
Dame Angela Lansbury, because I thought it was just Mrs. Lovett, and then I was informed about the Bed Knobs and Broomsticks reference, and I was like, oh, so it's just Angela Lansbury.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see Eglantine Price playing Mrs. Lovett in a community theater production of Sweeney
That
Todd.
would make sense, honestly.
That's also very funny.
I need to go. I grew up on that movie. I need to go back and watch it again.
Yes.
Bertolt Brecht.
Brecht. The second most important question we will ask tonight. Would Brecht have a cell phone?
That was so funny. Like, what year do you think it is? Like, it's 22. And he gave the correct answer.
5. What is your problem?
The whole time during that scene, I was like,
Your problem is you're dead.
That was such a point where, like, A, I wasn't in the scene, and B, I was like, I know who this is, but I don't. I think Christy might be the only other one who does.
Oh no! As soon as he said Munich, I said Brecht is going to show up.
Yeah, I do remember that, and I still had no idea.
Yeah, Ben had no idea that Brecht was dead, for starters.
I didn't know Bertolt Brecht was a person.
Okay, everybody, we have a time limit. We can talk. I know I could yell about Brecht for a long time too. Dan, do you want to say something about Brecht?
Yeah, actually, Brecht is included in Fragments of the King. In the part that was written by one of our patrons and listeners, Ben Warner,
And also one of the voices.
Also one of the voices in the beginning.
Now I remember that.
Yep, you should have known that. That's okay.
There was a lot.
There was a lot. It was mentioned in there, and I was like, let's get weird.
I didn't know there was a real person listed.
That's fair.
Oh my god.
Sorry, Ben.
Cool. Okay, we're very much jumping ahead. We got kind of some speedrun questions for the rest of the content of the season, and then we'll do our general process, which will probably jump back around. This is the way this always works, right?
Yeah.
We had a super interesting situation in the second half of this season, where we had a team member, Reagan, end up completely separate from the rest of the team for multiple episodes. Before it finally culminated in her winding up trapped in the tank trick, and the fun party split having to try to solve that problem. This, I know, on the back end led to some interesting conversations about player agency, because this was a very unique thing to have happened. So I asked Christy for some thoughts about that, both going solo as a player in a season where it was unplanned. And also, I know that Ben and Dan had a conversation about how player agency was handled in that situation. So if you two are comfortable sharing, I would love to hear a little bit from you guys about what sparked that conversation and what you guys talked about. And then I'll bring in a little bit of Christy's response to my questions that I had for her about that.
I basically asked Dan, during a passing period, I texted him real quick and go, I know that one of his big things is player agency as a GM. I'm an aspiring GM that I want to run stuff when, the real BBEG of scheduling allows it to happen. But also just being able to understand more to be a better player in general. And I asked him, this is a really important thing to you, and yet you put a character with no agency in this situation. What was your kind of take on this? Were you prepared to kill this character when they had no agency of it?
So at the moment in time, no. Even though we play a game where there is dire peril involved, where characters could die, there was no way in hell I was going to off Reagan during that. I would have hurt the other ones that were helping, which almost happened. With the
almost.
That's okay.
That's minor compared to some of the stuff that's happened. You didn't fall on a poop stick and get blown up. So
yeah, he just likes cutting off pieces of me.
But I don't want to say that there was plot armor or protective armor with that, but I also realized that I did not realize at the moment that I damseled Reagan, and that bothers me that I did that. But I would have done that to anyone, not just the femme character that was there. But that kind of hit me, and I'm beating myself up about that a little bit. It turned out okay, I think. I think it told a good story, and added drama to the element, not because it was a femme in the box, but because it was just it fit it could have been anyone.
It was whoever went off on their own.
Yes.
The fact that happened to be one of the femme characters was incidental to what happened.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I want to stress. It wasn't just because it was Christy who is or Reagan, excuse me, that was the more of the hyper femme than, not even hyper femme, but the most femme I've ever done.
So to share Christy's response to what I said. I'm double checking how I phrased it when I asked. What I asked her, because again, I asked her the questions phrased a little differently than the way I had finally written them down. I said, how is running solo different in a group season like this versus last season where everyone had solo-ish episodes by intent? And then how much did you and Dan collaborate and negotiate or not on the lack of player agency involved in the tank scenario? And this is what she shared with me. Running solo in a group season gave me a bit of freedom to test boundaries. When we planned to have solo missions, there was an implied safety. It would have been narratively dissatisfying to force us into situations we couldn't navigate alone. With the group mission, safety comes from the other players. Reagan going rogue led her to a consequence, and I was excited to explore what consequences look like in this game. Similarly, I was excited to explore what Reagan is like without Ross. They've generally provided support and balance for each other, and Reagan has relied on Ross to keep her from going too far. I wanted to see what kind of trouble she could get in without her bestie to talk her out of doing something crazy.
And this is why I love her.
And then in response to how much she and Dan did or didn't talk, she said, Dan was careful to ensure that the consequences of that, the dunk tank, wasn't too far out of bounds. I was obviously in for putting Reagan in a situation she wasn't equipped to handle, but I'm also... and I don't believe in a no-win scenarios kind of gal. So you can tell me that I have no ability to save myself, and I'm going to keep trying anyway. My castmates are also very crafty, and I thank them for rolling with the punches to help Reagan out of that pickle.
And I had contingencies in place that if these two chuckles did not succeed, because dice, if that didn't happen, then there might be a then there would be a way that Reagan would have been able to get out of that.
Possibly with much more after effect.
Yeah, like a whole lot of piranha bites.
and notice that even while we chuckleheads were trying, as soon as her feet were free, Christy jumped in and said, okay, so now can I just swim out?
Yeah. Am I done? Am I done now? Great. Thank you. I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that was a really interesting conversation to lead out of that.
And it was kind of fun getting to be kind of the audience, at least for the two of us.
Yeah.
It was kind of like not being able to say anything.
Oh my God, we were muted, but like
the looks on your faces.
Well, and me in editing, I could hear the little noises that we were making of just horror, just being like.
That's right, because you guys were like physically in a different building at the time.
There was nothing we could do. We were all the way across Carcosa at that point.
Yeah.
With Reagan, I know we're probably going to tie to this, or we're going to talk about it. Reagan's mermaid outfit.
We are going to talk about that later.
Okay.
It's in a different question.
Right.
I even told you which question it's in.
I'm sorry,
in the
I forget.
Discord.
Told you, smooth brain koala day.
Get in the Discord.
Well, you're not going to see this question.
Not this one.
But you can get in the Quest of Chaos Discord and get all this fun stuff. But yes, we will talk about that. I didn't actually write this question. It was a very last minute thing that I realized I hadn't included. But the end of the season involved a lot of both literal and metaphorical unmasking. And so I'd be curious in just very briefly, and again, with kind of our parameters in place of like a lot of people still going to get interrogated as we continue forward with these characters. But does anybody want to speak to, what the choices that they made in those final moments of having to unmask? And I think this question was kind of specifically directed toward Rowan and River a little bit, because Rowan really pushed back on like what that meant. Both what did it mean to mask and what did it mean to unmask, and how that was presented kind of throughout the whole season. And River pulled a very dramatic version of sort of lifting the mask with flashing your credentials. So I'd like to start with the two of you if you have any kind of thoughts on the literal versus metaphorical unmasking and the choices you made there.
Yeah, it was something I was thinking about quite a lot through the last probably third of the season of, because we've been told about, masking and unmasking being something significant, and it wasn't clear, is this a good idea or a really bad idea? And
I don't know.
And so, yeah, I was kind of had it in the back of my mind that there would be an unmasking moment. And I got to that one where it was no, this is not a play anymore. This is real life. I am going to become my real life persona and do what he would do in a situation when somebody's attacking another person.
And for you, was that even becoming just River, or was that becoming Mike?
That's interesting.
Or was that even something you...
Mostly River, because Mike doesn't get into that kind of situation.
That's fair.
And River as influenced by Rooster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one line you said. Of what would he do?
Yeah. I mean, Rowan was thinking about what that meant all the way through, and was pushing back on the Phantom of Truth when he was pushing her to unmask. Even as you say, being like, which one? I have several. I've got like the physical like glasses that she wears that she had decided was the mask in this situation, but she also has the mask of Rowan, and she has the mask of Special Agent Hodgson. We all have masks and we trade them out and everything. This is something that I've thought a lot about because I'm obsessed with Persona 5, and that's a running theme through the entire game. And leading up to that moment, it was very much... It was a difficult choice because for her specifically, this is not an affectation. The glasses are not she needs them in order to not be blinded in bad lighting. And so removing them could have put her in danger, but it was also getting to the point where it's like, die all, die merrily, something's going to happen, make a choice and go with it. And it was just the two of them, just her and the Phantom of Truth at that point, which I found very interesting, actually, where Rowan was having to confront what is truth. She still hasn't answered that for herself, but it started, I think, with her taking off the glasses, which is part of her persona as Rowan.
And it is interesting because
He's doing the dance.
even from earlier on in the season, when the initial conversation about maybe we should put masks on came up, and Rowan was like, "Oh, I'll just use my glasses." It was interesting because I'm like, I would not consider that a mask for Rowan because they are so essential, and it has been established as such an essential part of her. And so right from the get-go, there was like, oh, is this an active or a passive attempt to buck the rules?
It was a semi-active attempt also, as I was demonstrated at the beginning when I put this mask on, having to wear glasses with a mask suck.
Oh, that's also practical.
So she was, I mean, it was a very much a practical aspect of it, of I don't want to have to deal with putting something on my face when I already have to wear something on my face.
Anyway, Joseph or Ben, did you guys have any thoughts on that? I know it wasn't quite as drastic of a situation for your characters. So.
I mean, the weird moment for Ari, because Ari the whole time had no idea, and that was okay, because he'd been studying it and the ambiguity of it, trying to figure it out based on what text. Until he pulled off Ross's mask.
I forgot about that.
And I remember I'm really sorry if this is bad.
Yep.
Oh.
And then it was bad when Ross pulled off Anita's.
Yeah. But that moment of still not knowing, but going, this isn't theoretical anymore. Bad stuff's happening. We got to do stuff. But he, of anybody, knew the risks because he had studied all these things. So I think that was the big moment for him of kind of going, I don't know, but this is the best decision I can make in the moment.
This goes against the thing, one of our rules of, what would we have done if, or done something different. I will say that I had thought about tearing off Ross's face when you pulled that off. I'm like, how tied to that is? And
how tied to his face is he?
No. How tied to the mask is Ross right now. And if Ross was deep into that character, then it would have been like gooey, pulling off like that great cheese pull.
Yeah.
But that wasn't
I actually had the same thought while I was thinking about it and realized Ross wasn't pulling an Anita. Mm-hmm. Ross wasn't living the role. Ross was still Ross.
In your interpretation. I want to be clear.
Sorry.
To speak to Ross's actual...
Sorry.
Sure.
This was Ari's
Ari's thought process.
Yeah.
At the
leading
time.
up to him pulling off Ross.
Yeah.
That was Ari's thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for Ross, he might have been on the way to more closer to Anita if they were there any longer.
Sure.
Which is kind of terrifying. But especially since he kind of had to lean into that Prince role to kind of get anything done in Carcosa. Like nothing else was happening until he and River started kind of leaning on that a lot. And he had to get anywhere with Anita, he had to really lean into that. And it was definitely, thinking back on it, probably closer than I thought.
Yeah.
To like,
well, especially with the melding between Royal and Ross.
Yeah,
like,
that
was the point where Rowan was like, "This is getting bad."
Yeah, because that was interesting. Because like Ross left Rowan by herself, and that was not Ross's intention. Because Ross did not know about what was happening with them and Royal. So it was really, yeah.
And also just fascinating with the choices of masking versus unmasking with the choices of roles, because again, Rowan was very much bucking the system as much as possible the entire time, which also I think interesting that then Rowan was in the ensemble, if you will. Also somewhat by choice. She does not want to be the center of attention here, and in some ways that was probably a good thing, seeing what happened with other people who were playing more prominent roles.
Yeah. There was one other moment with Ari because he had kind of hedged bets a little bit when getting dressed, of going with the white mask, knowing that the pallid mask is a thing and is sometimes the harbinger of the king.
You were beating yourself up after that
I
because
know.
you forgot about how important the white mask
white was bad. I was thinking in terms of the character's colors. And then once I thought about it later, going, oh no, Ari knew this. Okay, he was actually going for that.
Ooh, I just remember the costume shop and the little bit of dig that I was able to throw in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sergeant.
But but so that little bit of him at the end trying to put on the mask and playing the pallid mask to the king to try and talk out of it, that didn't work.
Oh, missed opportunity. The dressmaker could have seen you and said, "Oh yeah, you would have fit in that outfit, okay."
You took so many shots the entire season.
Yeah,
like that could be a drinking game. We did not need
Wingless chicken.
Speaking of
the wingless chicken thing was all TJ. That's TJ's fault.
That was great.
Yeah.
Speaking of final digs and putting a bow on dead characters, at the end of the season, we saw a lot of folks dealing with the repercussions of their experiences in very different ways. And very especially, we saw scenes for Rowan, River, and Ross addressing very explicit physical and mental tolls that have been building up for several seasons now that have been kind of not getting addressed. Was there anything about this mission in particular that seemed to prompt you to lead your agents toward those routes? And I'm very specifically, we're in spoilers if you haven't heard the interludes. I'm very specifically thinking of Ross going to therapy, Reagan not only having to shift her work. God,
it's okay.
It's because it's the same thing. I hate this show.
Reagan our names.
It's also because that's where Christy sits normally.
Yeah.
And I messed up. I should have left you on the other side. Ross going to therapy, Rowan having to shift both physical workout, but then also actively seeking out more help with the brain stuff, and River having this, real heart-to-heart with his wife about where he's at mentally with the whole situation. But yeah, anything you guys want to speak to on that, and maybe how this season kind of felt like the right time for those things to come back?
At least for Ross, it kind of felt like the culmination. Like at the end of season 7, he's definitely more of a Delta Green agent than he has been, like in any other point in his time with Arcel. Like maybe he was probably a lot of the way there at the beginning of this season, but definitely by the end he's stepped into it completely. Yeah. And then going to therapy was part of that. Even like the second interlude with just like going to Vegas, just making the choice that he's sober now, just like helping that little bit more with thing, especially after the burn and everything.
Someone else who doesn't drink on missions, which is interesting.
Rowan doesn't drink now either.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was definitely, it felt like a culmination after Ruth and the burn, and then kind of just was a lot of stuff happening to Ross, and then starting with Cotoscope and then into Carcosa, like Ross was being a lot more active, and then like his thoughts going out of it with the after action at the cap on the end of season, and then with the interludes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want to specifically address that question because it kind of gets into a choice I didn't make and might make in the future.
That's fine.
Interesting.
That in and of itself is interesting, and you don't have to say anything if you don't want to.
But yeah, I mean, I do think, River is seeing his role in the team change.
Yeah. That's fair.
For Rowan at the end of season 6, she didn't have the mental or physical space to really process what had happened to her. She was still recovering from dealing with the explosions and the shit sticks and everything that had happened to her, but especially blowing the guy's head up. She has not really had the space to deal with all of that. And the more that, like, being in Carcosa, and I think being in Carcosa really underlined for her that the work goes on. And she's going to have to deal with that. And she's going to have to be in physical and mental shape to be the leader that her team needs her to be right now. And she needs to not be hung up on, being terrified that she's going to blow someone's head up if she loses control. Or, she's had to stop running. And so now it's like, okay, what does that mean as far as my physical fitness for this? Which is an open question. She's old as a Delta Green agent goes and has been through a lot more than even some Delta Green agents. Between being shot, falling out of a very high window and almost freezing to death, the explosions, she's been through so much physically.
Double imprisonment.
Yeah, and malnourishment. She's a little bit younger than I am right now, but her body's like 20 years older.
And someone asked me, why don't you kill characters more freely? Because there's more interesting things to do to them.
Death is frequently the least interesting option.
It's the option that gives them the rest that they want so badly.
Yeah.
We don't get that.
No, I'm playing with millennials. Yeah. There's no such thing as rest.
The worst nightmare is not getting to sleep.
Yes.
It's true.
On a less serious note, it was kind of fun to have to pass off the new character curse to Ben.
No longer be the new kids.
Yeah.
The first 3 rolls.
All critical fails.
Oh my god.
Somebody had to take
And Ross had it originally after he, because we didn't have new characters at the beginning. We all came in together.
Right.
And then it
was River.
No.
For the most part.
Well, yes, but it wasn't the new character curse.
Right.
So yeah, and then it became Ross because he took it for him and Reagan, and now it's Ruben.
Okay. Well,
and Ruben didn't have trauma at the end of this.
I specifically didn't ask you, and that's why. Your name is not on this question. But that's going to bring us into a slightly generally more lighthearted part of the evening. Almost. There's going to be one deep question, and then we're going to get to the fun stuff. Let's just go ahead and do the deep question now, and then we'll hop into the more fun stuff because I don't want us to run too long tonight. But we've got some more fun things to talk about. This is one that I always put in here on big, hefty seasons like this because I think it's important to talk about openly and without stigma so that everyone normalizes it, which is we stress the importance of safety tools at our tables. Redacted Reports uses things like lines and veils, the X card, and pregame checklists where the players can indicate to the GM and to each other what topics they are enthusiastically interested in playing and which ones they do not want to explore. I'm not going to explain what all of these are right now, but I encourage you to look them up if you're not familiar with these kinds of TTRPG safety tools. And these are really never more important than when we're playing horror games, which are designed to push boundaries. Redacted Reports has a unique need for these because the Cthulhu mythos leans heavily into psychological manipulation and body horror. This season had a very high proportion of both compared to any previous season, and we have at least 2 cast members who have very hard lines about body horror. And we've talked about this a little bit before. It came up a little bit in season 4 when Rooster's arm got eaten. It's come up in a couple of other seasons briefly as well. There was a lot. You guys probably noticed this is the most content warnings we've had on episodes for a variety of things. So I'd love to hear just briefly from the group what it was like navigating those lines this season, what kinds of conversations happened in advance, what things happened in the moment, if you care to share about them, and were there any discoveries or surprises that you had this season that you want to share? Again, our safety tools are also in place in this conversation. You do not have to share anything you're not comfortable sharing, but if anyone wants to speak to how that came up this season, I would be very curious to hear about it.
I wanted to get as close to the edge of the envelope as I could on this one. And knowing that these folks trust me with that, and I know that if there was something that went too far, they'd be like, X card, we're done. And
we did once in this season.
we have the luxury of being recorded. So we can go back and redo a scene. Where, sometimes in like live broadcasts and stuff, you do not have that opportunity. But you get to see it live then. But with us, it is behind the scenes. I did bring forth the idea that I'm like, I want to get some of the really weird body horror stuff in here, like Johann being a puppet, the toll collector, Oh, I love that character. I wanted to get really, really squeaky. I wanted to get close to it, and I know that it was like we're gonna stop on that one. And got to the edge, and that was that. We had discussed it. I had gotten warnings mostly from Ren, because Ren was like this, and all right, we'll describe to a certain point, and then that'll be it. Is that okay? Okay, then we're going good. The lotus pods with the eyes. Sorry, folks. I can't remember the name of that.
Trypophobia?
Trypophobia? I think so.
Trypophobia? Yeah, I think so.
Something like that. I apologize. I don't recognize the name of it.
Fear of many small holes together.
Yeah.
Which is perfectly legitimate if you think about where they come from. And I will go no further on that conversation.
Yeah. I'm not going to talk about where that comes from because that's
yeah, I am instating a new rule in our Discord that if you're going to talk about phobias, you must include the definition of what the phobia is behind a spoiler cut in the Discord, because there was a lot of that going around. It's a lot of very fun Greek words. As a linguist, I love words. As someone who's going to Google this to find out what it is and might discover a new phobia, that's bad, and I don't want to be responsible for that.
I got a pop-up book one year for Halloween that was the pop-up book of phobias. I love that book. That was great.
Explains so much.
As someone with a couple that will absolutely be in there, I can go without.
I will say this because I don't want to make anybody. We don't need to talk about this too much longer, and I don't need to harp on anybody outing themselves and their specific phobias because that's dangerous. But I will say that it is great to see a table where there is this amount of trust, and the fact that you guys have played together so long and that you have done these check-ins, that this is a place where you can have your GM come to you and say, I want to push this line, knowing that everyone knowing that he will stop when you say stop, and everyone knowing that he's aware of what he's doing and you're willing to try it out together. I think that's a very cool thing to see, and that's a very healthy approach to playing horror when maybe you don't actually care that much for horror, which is kind of a weird situation to be in. Ren and then Ben.
No, I'm saying that's me.
Oh.
I don't. You're going to talk if you're going to raise your hands.
I don't care for horror, and I'm playing it.
Well, and it's I'll out myself because I think most people know mine by now. I have misophonia, and I have a big problem with eyes or teeth being damaged when they're in a person's head. Very specific on that one. And a couple of those got hit very hard this season. And I trust Dan. I'm verbalizing that this is something that I need to work on, is that I generally say that I can handle misophonic stuff if I know that it's coming. And I think that I am proud enough of that I sometimes push myself past where I actually should handle it. Because I wasn't the one who called the stop on the teeth thing. And I'm grateful that someone else did, because I didn't realize how much it was starting to affect me until I stopped and went, oh, no, this is actually a problem. So I'm very grateful for this table. I'm very grateful for folks being willing to be like, no, this actually is, stop.
And that is an interesting, this was not the segue I was going to use for this, but it is an interesting segue into what you said about you pride yourself on being able to handle some of the misophonic issues when you know that they're coming, because as the editor, I remember we had a very specific conversation about, because I was checking in about like, do we actively need all of these content warnings? Because I was checking on like what actually is the sound.
Yeah.
Because something like misophonia is a more generalized content warning versus like I have a hard line for the team that they have to put in content warnings for sirens and car accidents because I listen in the car.
Yep.
And as someone who listens in the car, and I know I'm not the only one, I'm like, that can be really dangerous if I'm on the road and I hear an actual Doppler effect siren in my,
Which I'm very good at finding.
Yes. But I remember us having a very specific where I was like, what is the actual content? And Ren was like, I was having problems with the sound of someone's face getting ripped off. And I was like, valid, we'll keep the content warning. That's disgusting.
My general rule of thumb for misophonia stuff is if I have to go into the folder labeled gross sounds, I'm putting the misophonia label on it.
And that's a super valid thing. Again, you are, as the sound editor, you're the worst and also the best person to have that specific problem, because it means you can kind of cue onto what you think is going to trigger it.
Yes. And then I don't listen to it in the whole context. I leave that for other people to do.
Yeah. So I think off of that, that's kind of like my last really like intensive question. So I think let's get into some of our quick process questions. We'll try to keep these briefer than we normally do, because I think we're already pushing time a little bit for what I wanted to do. The most important question that we will ask this entire night: who was the voice of Captain Jack?
My chonky tabby, John, because I know that I can spin him up into the purr machine that can be heard, Alondra can attest to this, across the room. He is very loud.
We had to like turn up I think we asked you at one point to turn up the purrs.
I was like, okay.
Yeah,
like we need more.
More purr. But yeah, I
Can't make it any better.
I had my hand recorder in one hand pointed down at his face and moving it anytime he tried to like headbutt it, and then was just petting him to get a solid like 2 minutes of purring.
Nice. I wanted to make sure we got that question, and thank you, Leanna.
Thank you, Leanna. That is the most important question.
The most important question that we could ask. It's everyone's favorite time. What did Ren learn as an editor?
I thought that was the most important question.
It's not the most important.
No,
it's just the one.
This one you get to help me with.
Shall I go ahead and read the next question? So
Do it.
Just like double up.
Because my answer is the intros.
The intros. The intros this season were the most drastic departure yet from the way the intros started. They followed a character that was wholly unrelated to the main story, who is voiced by Grant Corvin.
Thank you so much, Grant.
Thank you, Grant. You're amazing. And it also included guest voices from 3 of the writers who worked on Fragrance of the King, John Wick, Fabian Padilla, and Ben Warner. Thank you all. How did that come about? And what do we want to say about the process of that thing?
So prior to this season, the intros were the purview of one person or the whole team, basically. In general, like Charlie and Betty were a different circumstance. Yeah. But we had talked about it, and we're like, it doesn't really make sense to do it the way that we had been doing it. It makes more sense for it to be an external story.
In that instance, it was when everybody's already their own solo episode, it doesn't make any sense for them to solo intro solo.
And for this one, we really wanted to lean into the weird. And a big part of the weird was, what does the descent into madness through Fallen into Carcosa look like to someone who isn't a Delta Green agent? Like, what does that feel like. And Alondra wrote our intros this season. We're all very pleased.
You interpreted a much better version of that of where I came from, because that was not where I started from at all for that. So good job, all my dramaturgical background coming out.
It's one of those things where it's like what we call instinct is really just like the buildup of all the things you've experienced and trained in, and it's just so fast you don't realize it.
I was going to go with intent of the playwright versus
interpretation of the reader. Yeah.
Something you taught me.
It's also interesting because part of the reason why we decided to pre-script them, and I think this was part of the discussion that led to me writing them at all, was that Dan had already decided that he wanted to use some of the actual text from the fragments, some of the fragments of the King.
Yeah.
And had already reached out to these writers who were friends of his and had gotten these recordings. So we had these recordings of them reading the lines. And then it was a question of how do we incorporate this?
Yeah, because I think the original intent was just like having a few random quotes from them starting off the episode and just being like, Squidgy, what in the hell is this?
Going on?
And then it turned into that. And wow. So good.
And then we decided to frame it. So, so that was, the one thing that was universally true was that there was a lot of conversation about how do we push into the weird? How do we do something weird? And so I think that's where the pitch came from of like, what if it's completely removed from our cell? Mm-hmm. What if it's something entirely unrelated? And because I've worked in theater for 3 decades, and for 10 plus years was a freelance stage manager, I was like, well, like, what if it's the stage manager watching everything go to hell?
And not being able to do anything about it.
A stage manager's literal worst nightmare is not being able to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And so that it ended up being a very interesting take. And I think the general consensus is that we're probably going to continue experimenting with the intros going forward.
Yeah.
Based on how well we all liked what came of this season.
And so this, sorry.
I was going to say, we like them, and it seems as though that everybody also, like all of the listeners and all the feedback that I've gotten is, these intros are fantastic. They're really weird. They're really good. It's really neat. And so, if it works, we're not going to fix it.
Yeah.
We're going to do something weird like that again, maybe.
So, honestly, the biggest editing challenge of this season for me was something that I did with the wedding episode, which eventually everyone will get to hear.
And if you haven't heard it yet, you can join our Patreon. It's an exclusive episode where we hear Rory's wedding.
Aww.
It was very cute. But it was something that that I didn't even really do hardcore for the wedding, but I did for the intros, was taking something that was scripted and building that into then a soundscape. Some of which with sounds that I didn't know. I had to be like, hi, what does a headset beep sound like? Is it like this, or this?
This was, Ren is sort of Pharaoh master when it comes to the scoring of the show itself.
Yep.
And this was a very unique working situation where it was much more like traditional playwriting. You're working off of a script where you have to adhere to what's scripted.
Yep.
And there were changes that we made in the back end. There were some where Ren would ask me and be like, what did you mean by this? And I would go look at what I wrote and I'd be like, I have no idea. Don't do that. That's stupid. Not that. That's dumb. I don't know what I was trying to do.
One of the biggest questions that we bandied back and forth was when to use the static.
Yes. There was a lot of conversations about how actual headset static works. And when are we actually hearing the headset versus when is the static representing Carcosa encroaching on the real world?
Yeah.
Lots of conversations about who is in which location compared to where we're hearing the sound from.
Mm-hmm. And my favorite thing that I edited this whole season was the intro for 15. Hands down, no question.
Was that the finale?
That was the finale. And I remember very distinctly, I think it was like 9 or 10 at night, I had put all of the voices together and I was like, I'm not putting music on this until I'm like, Alondra, was this what you meant? And we were back and forth for like 2 hours on it, I think.
Yeah.
But that is not a complaint in any way, shape, or form. You only really gave me a couple of notes.
We experimented with a lot of stuff. That was also interesting because the fact that and this is something that I don't think happens that often in your editing process, the fact that you handed me the built track with all the voices without any scoring is actually what led to me going, what if we don't kick the music in until the repetition starts?
And it helps that John's voice is just so creepy the way that he did that with the "this is how
No
it
offense.
ends." No, he would take that as a compliment. You know that.
No, I don't. I
Do
don't
the breathe.
He knew I watched some of his YouTube stuff, and
Okay,
he
fair.
leans into the creepy when it's appropriate.
Understood the assignment.
He absolutely understood the assignment.
Also, for the record, just Grant's scream. You sent me the video originally of him trying to get out of that
Get
door.
through the door, yeah.
Spoiling all my social content.
Sorry.
No, building up anticipation when people get to see
But
it.
that video, I mean, one, if you've watched this channel, you know Grant, his facial expressions, he's such an amazing actor. And I had no context for what this was going to be. I had not heard any intros. And you just sent me this and you're like, this is going to be in the intro. I'm like, oh my God, what's going on?
My favorite one of those was Grant and I were sitting in the middle of this very studio, in fact, recording, and he did his first horrified scream right next to the microphone, and I was like, well, that's blown all to hell and back, so we can't use that. So how about this? You do the recording sitting in front of the microphone. I will give you a 3 count to get up, walk over to that far corner, and then scream.
Yeah.
I was grateful that our neighbors were gone at that point.
Kind of like the screams I gave you back in season 1 for The Nightmare.
First rule of screaming onto a microphone: don't. Do not do it when you're right here. If you have to, be as far across the room as you can get.
Ren is just collecting a terrible blackmail collection of sound files from all of us. We've got, I'm building the Reagan soundboard personally of all of Christie's quips because it amuses me. But Ren definitely also has several takes of me snorting coke.
Yep.
I believe that was for the Patron game.
Yep. I also
In case
have.
anyone was wondering.
I also have you shaking various small bones in a leather bag.
Oh yeah.
I shook a lot of teeth in a bag.
I have several versions of your very creepy laugh and a kind of a smoker's cough.
It's
that
not.
was good.
It's not a season of Redacted Reports until Alondra's had to Foley a weird laugh. Yeah. So.
But yeah, so I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm looking it was a challenge because it was taking. Because I was also the director, sitting here across from Grant and getting him to do the reads and being like, this is what I think is happening. I would change the process next time to have you in the room as well, or at least on a call.
Yeah.
But that's, that is for next time. But it was a really interesting challenge for me of taking this script and being like, okay, I know what happens in the game. How do I make this the part that everyone goes,
Yeah. But yeah, so that was sort of the 2-in-1. And then riffing, I don't remember which one came first, the intros or the artwork, but then riffing off the idea of the stage manager was where we got to the art this season.
Yeah.
That is an actual photograph of one of my actual stage management books, just with a blank page on the front. So if you look very closely, you can see all the tabs on the side that are for scene labels and everything. And then I just put out a call and was like, hey, what's a bunch of just weird, creepy things that might get written in the margin of a binder in a rehearsal? And we just sort of
I remember that. I was texting you
riff
while my
there.
students were taking a test.
So, yeah, fun fact, always check the episode art because we hide a lot of weird stuff in there because almost nobody really looks at them. So there's always fun secrets in there.
little Easter eggs.
Yeah, a little fun stuff. Let me take we're getting real close, so I'm gonna have to ditch some of these questions, unfortunately. We should also address, though, we finally got the closest that Redacted Reports is ever going to get to a musical episode.
Yes!
Full musical number. So can we talk a little bit briefly about how that came about and what the process was like collaborating with our wonderful Tom Padula, who wrote the Passengers Holler.
First question, were you planning
Oh no.
on doing a musical episode in here?
Nope. Christy said jazz hands, and I was like, "Oh, here it goes." Because you're around a bunch of theater nerds and theater kids. You start dancing, even jokingly, and somebody's going to break into a show tune.
Yep.
And I was like, this is where it is. This is what happens.
And you were so fast on that.
That's what I thought.
There was no pause.
Nope. I kind of pride myself on being
It's
able to come
like
up
you
with
guys are good at your jobs.
I pride myself on that. But yeah, no, that was honestly spur of the moment. And then after, that's why I didn't have any lyrics or what they were singing. Like when we first originally played, we didn't know.
I mean, you had the lines that you dropped in because that was what I was pulling from when I reached out to
That's
to
just
Tom.
because I copy pasted what I saw immediately. I was like, I need something quick, pull up, and not wait a tick, wait a click now.
Yes, wait a click.
It was like, all right, because I have 2 screens, 2 monitors up, which I'm probably gonna have 3 up soon. But I've got a monitor with all my reference material. So I just looked over, pulled up, went to a random page, and I saw something that looked like a verse or a couplet, and grabbed it and threw it in, because it didn't have to make sense. Because part of it was, let's get weird, right?
Yeah.
And I noticed it had a hasiter in there. I'm like, all right, cool, let's do it, because there is a unwritten rule, especially in Call of Cthulhu, that if someone at the table says Haster 3 times during the time, he shows up. Yeah, Haster. He shows up. And there's a story about a Phoenix Game Convention where a bunch of people are playing, and they're all playing Call of Cthulhu. And one player says Haster, and then another player at another table says Haster, and then another player at another table said Haster, and all of the GMs, because they were all in the same room, looked at each other and said, same world, same world, same world, agreed. And Haster showed up at all 5 of the tables.
That's amazing.
Now,
So good.
now, mind you, this is secondhand knowledge. Thank you, Michael Klopper, for that.
Oh, of course, it's Clopper.
Yeah.
So everybody knows Klopper. So yeah, I've got to do that. But kind of jazz hands. You do jazz hands, Haster shows up. So song,
And a musical number.
yeah, a musical number popped up, and part of it, and the thing that there's a part that I find so sweet. All of us pretty much have said, no, we're not going to do a musical episode. We're not going to do any singing. And the one that said that they wouldn't do the singing the most is actually in the song.
Yeah, but we'll get there.
Well, I mean, I think we're there.
Well, so the next part of this was Dan looking at me and being like, do we talk to Alex? And I was like, let me get a hold of Alessandro, Tom Padula's SCA name. And I was like, I think this is up his alley, him or Amric, my apprentice brother. And I was like, so I reached out to Tom that day and was like, how do you feel about helping us with something in the podcast? And it took a lot of back and forth. I heard it for the first time, some of the lead up to it when I was going to my sister's for Thanksgiving. And then, why don't you tell us about what happened with some of the recording?
Well, he needed some extra voices for the kind of background singers.
The ensemble.
So yeah, and we do a monthly get together, which is called the Red House Bardic Circle, mostly SCA people, and.
Was that the thing that we went to?
No, what I took you to is choir.
Oh, okay. Sorry. My apologies. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Different house.
Okay.
Yeah, so we showed up to this one month, and he gave them the lines with no real context, and said, I want you all to just kind of chant this in a whisper. So,
and you knew what was going
Like
on.
the 4th time that's happened. This is pretty normal at Sandra's from what I understand.
So we said Hassiter way more than 3 times.
Maybe this is why the curse followed us.
No, well, maybe.
The curse had
maybe.
already.
But maybe that's why it's continued.
In fairness, though, there is this thing, Bardic immunity. Like I think that might have saved them.
It's kind of like in D&D, a Bardic inspiration, and around here we have Bardic immunities.
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually a historical thing. If you
I
look
am
at.
aware.
I'm telling them.
So and then I got this piece where Tom was like, I'm not sure about this, but you know what? I'm done tinking with it because if I don't stop touching it, I'm gonna break something. And I was like, give. And then I heard it, and I was crying with how excited I was to hear it. And I immediately sent it to Dan and Olandra.
I put it on loop.
And I said, do not send this to the rest of the team until it's in context. I want them to hear the whole thing.
And then I had
so
to try
hard.
to keep everybody from saying things in Discord that were alluding to it. 'Cause I'm like, if you spoil the fact it's a musical episode, we're not going to get the payoff.
Yeah.
It was also hard because that was right when we had to make announcements about the Crit Awards, which, by the way, you should submit for. You still have 2 days. It's open till Friday. Because that one's not eligible this
Right.
year. That would be eligible. And I was just like, oh, God, timing.
It's eligible for next year.
Yeah.
So, you know.
The funniest part about the whole thing, though, was just Christy going, no, I'm not the one who did it. No.
And Seth being over there being like, no, we will not break into song.
And the fact that he was on it. The fact that you were on it, that is just so sweet to me.
But yeah, given that we will not ever be doing we're not giving the Buffy treatment. We're not going to do a musical episode
That's
with
so much
people
work.
singing. It's too much work. It would be very expensive, and not everyone is comfortable doing that. So this was a kind of a great nod to that element of having the musical number break out, and then having everybody look at each other and be like, let's not do that again. So it's kind of a fun button to like this ongoing conversation about a musical episode.
Are you satisfied? Are you all satisfied now? You
better be
got
satisfied.
it. If you're not,
Are you
too
not
bad.
Are you not entertained?
This is what you get. Okay. Thomas is gonna kick me out here if I go too much longer. So we're gonna do like 2 quick speed run questions. Normally these are rapid fire where I let you explain. We're so tight on time, you don't get to explain. You just get to shoot off your answer. And then I will give us a little outro. That's one exception. I will let Dan explain his on this. What scene or character moment did you most enjoy or are most proud of this season? And Dan may have another one, but we are going to start with the dress.
So during the game, we often share images or whatnot in our Discord. Since we are a audio medium, I have to explain things. But if I can share a picture or a map or a location to these folks, then they can see it and they can help help describe things.
It's specifically very helpful for me because I can't picture things.
Which is a whole nother story about how to GM that way. We can talk about that another day. But I had this idea, I had this image for a dress, and for actually all of the costumes, and I had done a search for this specific mermaid dress. And I found it and I shipped it off to the crew. And everybody saw it and they were like, oh, that's really pretty. I'm like, yeah, it's really cool. It's very, very, very dramatic. Mm-hmm. Come time when it's available for everybody to listen to, it was Red Dead Coquette.
It was Red Dead Coquette.
Red Dead Coquette says, I have this, you explained it, this is the image of the dress, and posted a picture of the dress. Very similar dress. Turns out, son of a bitch, it's the same exact fucking dress. And as a GM or as a storyteller, being able to describe something in a detail, and it was still fairly vague, but my listener, my audience knew exactly what it was. They found it and they had the same, and they got the same image. There is no better, like, just source of joy and material and magic of storytelling there. And I still, like, I feel like I accomplished something. It's like, ding, accomplishment achieved or achievement.
Da-da-da-da.
Yeah. It gave me chills, still gives me chills now. And it really did, I think all of us deal with imposter syndrome at times. And this kind of squashed that imposter syndrome for a while. It's like, shit, I'm actually doing a pretty good job in what I'm doing. And somebody that listened to this got the same mental image that I did and brought it up. And it was the same dress, and just, that blew my mind. I mean, it still kind of blows my mind today.
And because we are an audio medium, for anybody who wants to know what this dress is, it is Terry Mugler's La Chimère ensemble, which was worn by Yasmin Le Bon in the fall 1997 show.
Wait, Terry, T-H-E-I-R-R-Y?
Terry Mugler. Yeah.
I love their cologne.
Yeah.
I wear their cologne
for those
often.
of you who have been seeing a lot of the Dune Part 2 red carpets, Zendaya has been wearing a lot of vintage Terry Mugler. Anyway,
That's why I recognize the
I
name.
did some back research to find this exact dress, so I could share that with all of you.
And this is why you
look
are
it up.
amazing.
Look it up. It is a beautiful piece. And then picture Christy wearing it all the time.
Terry Mugler, Habana is my favorite cologne of all time. Yeah, all right, cool.
See, you were onto something.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It's all connected.
Does anybody else have a scene or character moment that you most enjoyed or most proud of? Very, very quick.
I liked when right after we'd met Ari and he kind of saw the king in the video footage and ran off, and I liked having Ross go and chase him and having that little moment was really cool.
Yeah, great bonding moment.
I'm most proud of my exposition dump and getting to just go blah, and then looking at Dan, I'm like, do I need to stop? No, keep going.
The catharsis of finally getting to just keep saying the thing. So, anything like that?
Oh, as much as River hates going to St. Joseph's, all the hints Dan gives us when we visit there are just a joy.
Just so tasty.
Pay close attention to what was said there.
And that's all he's going to say on that. There weren't many specific character moments for Rowan this season. I think my favorite was at the end of the season when she acknowledged just how much she had lost in the team and being like, I got another fucking academic. What the fuck?
I know that already talked about the dress thing, but scenes wise, there are 3 scenes that I really liked. The Tollkeeper scene, even though it caused, it was a bit squidgy. I really liked that. I really loved how I got to be weird with Television Head, and then also the weirdness of John being a puppet, or excuse me, of Johan Vik.
Johan Vik, not John Wick.
Yo.
Did you just get that?
Yeah, you're done. Goodbye.
Bye, Ben.
That led to a whole different conversation where I was like, we have to stop using real people in the podcast. We're gonna get in trouble one day. But
Yes, I just figured it out.
Congratulations. That's what the Talkback is for. Revelations for everyone. Sometimes people who were there the whole time.
I was here the whole time.
Calls coming from inside the house.
I feel like I do this every talkback. I suddenly figure something out.
That's good.
Yeah, that's pretty standard. It's why I craft the questions the way I do in the order that I do. It's to give you time to catch up.
Well, yeah, I mean, harking back to that St. Joseph's comment.
Yeah.
At the end of every season, go back the last 3 or 4 seasons, and every time we visit, listen to that again.
Always listen to the whole credits and always go back and re-listen.
There was a drop
St.
early
Joseph's.
in episode 2 that I didn't catch until we were listening to the edited versions. It's like, oh wow, you dropped that it was a Thale and Vale.
The Thale and Vale, yeah.
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 I actually made that comment when I was editing. I was like, holy shit, we did the Vale thing it was Thale. We did the Thale thing really early.
Yep. I plant seeds for trees to be grown later.
Like a mark being drawn on someone's head at a thing in the desert. It doesn't
To
pay
be
off.
fair, it was supposed to be the next season.
In fairness.
It was the next season, just after some time.
That's not how numbers work.
It was
Look, Alondra, we don't know how numbers work.
I know you don't know how numbers work.
Numbers are a man-made construct. They lie.
And so on that note, I think we're going to do our wrap up because I have yet another monologue that everybody has to listen to. Thank you all for joining us for tonight's Talkback. Thank you for submitting questions. Thank you for probably putting questions in the chat that I fully didn't get a chance to see because it was moving so quickly, and I apologize. But hopefully you still had a great time hearing us talk about the process of all of this. One of the most common questions we get asked, not really anymore, everybody knows that I'm going to cover it, so they've stopped asking. Thank you for paying attention. Is what is coming next? So in the main feed, as is standard, we are going to be taking some time off between seasons to get ahead on editing and recording. We're actually in good shape recording wise, but we are we're trying to give Ren time to get a nice solid chunk of episodes edited. I'm not going to give you a return date yet, but we will be back probably sometime in the summer. Pay attention to our social media feed and our Discord, and we will let you know when we're returning as soon as we feel comfortable. However, in the meantime, we have a lot of bonus content, which I think you're all going to be very excited about. We've been banking a bunch of this for a very long time. For everyone, we have at least 2 episodes of For the Record that are going to be releasing, including Rowan's interview with Dr. Camille Harper, who is played by our own Agent Harold, and that is the interview that is referenced throughout the entirety of Season 7. So all of those sideways references that Ari keeps making to the incident and that Rowan keeps making, you will actually get to hear what that's about and get the full story on that.
I took lecture notes on this thing.
Yeah, we have at least one other episode that is ready to be released from For the Record as well. We might have more. You can always find those available on our website, the redactedreportspodcast.com. We might be dropping the Harper one in the main feed, to be determined.
Still discussing.
But it will certainly be up on the website, and we will make sure everybody knows about that. In addition to that, if you are a member of our Patreon at any level, you will be getting another brief supplemental case file. We haven't had one of those in a minute. Those are written by Agent Homer, who is Ben, and just provide little extra looks into things in the world of Arcel and Delta Green in general. But also, there might be some more King in Yellow content. We're kind of hoping to put 2 of our biggest nerds in a room together and make them talk to each other even more. To be determined. Most importantly, though, your wishes have been granted, and we will be dropping the full game of The Interns. We were gonna do a whole segment on this. I'm gonna do the speedrun version. We've been joking about having a fake trailer for a spinoff about The Interns pretty much since Ross and Reagan showed up on the show. And I pitched that this was the year to do that for the April Fool's Day, and I was gonna just script a fake trailer and recruit a bunch of people. And then Dan was like, "What if we played an actual game?" And I was like, "Can you keep it short and kill everybody?" And he was like, "Probably." So if you are a patron, you will be getting the full game that was played with our friends Cal, Danny, Nick, and Sam playing some of the hapless interns of Grandin and Burke, from which I edited the fake April Fool's Day trailer.
Which is now a real trailer.
Now it's actually a real trailer for a real thing that happened. Anyway, so this is my big shill moment. If you would like that, join our Patreon.
I believe it's at the $10 and up level, because that's when they start getting special episodes.
I think that's $10 and up.
Yes. So it's a little bit more of a commitment. You also get the wedding episode if you haven't heard that yet.
Which is fantastic.
And there might be some other fun stuff happening later in the year that you'll get access to at that level. Just saying. The last thing I'm going to let you know about, this one's my bad. Once again, I didn't get it done before the talkback. But we are going to be hosting a giveaway. First, we're actually going to be giving away 2 things. One of them is Rooster's Journal, which was handcrafted and doodled by Ben. This was supposed to be the giveaway last season, and a bunch of life happened, and we didn't get a chance to give it away. But we will also be giving away something else very cool, which is this copy of The King in Yellow. This is the Robert Chambers King in Yellow. It is annotated by Kenneth Haidt, and this is published by Arc Dream Publishing, the creators of Delta Green. It is a gorgeous copy. It's got these, if I can get to one, it's got these like beautiful, horrifying illustrations in it. It's got just crazy amounts of annotation for all of the stories. It has information about where the names of Carcosa and Hastur came from, which is from an Ambrose Bierce story. It's beautiful. Strongly recommend you pick up a copy if you're interested in this sort of thing. And we will have the cast sign the back of this one, and we'll be giving that away.
That's where the Chambers Hotel.
Yes, this is where the name of the Chambers Hotel came from, for anyone who hadn't caught on to that yet.
I got that reference.
Congratulations.
Anyway, so keep an eye out on our socials for that. We will be posting the link to that giveaway form. We will be drawing for both of those things. I meant to have that ready to go in a cool command to drop right now, but, stuff happened. So that'll be up in the next couple of weeks. We'll run it for a couple of weeks to give everybody a chance to enter. And also to give anybody who's listening to this podcast after the fact a chance at entering. I think that is going to wrap us up for this evening. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for listening. And remember, there are things that even now are unknowable by the human mind and unpronounceable by the human tongue. And you might meet more of them later this summer. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.